I sat in the dim light of the living room, nursing the remnants of a scotch that had lost its edge hours ago. The house was silent, except for the faint ticking of the clock above the fireplace. The stillness wasn't comforting. It was the sort that crept under your skin, gnawing at your nerves until you couldn't sit still. My wife, Lauren, had gone to bed hours ago, or so I thought. Lauren had always been a creature of habit, structured, predictable. She liked things just so, her routines carved in stone. That's what made the subtle shifts in her behavior so unnerving. The late-night texts, the sudden girls' weekends, the new lingerie she didn't wear for me. It was like watching a stranger inhabit the body of the woman I thought I knew. Tonight was supposed to be no different. She'd kissed me on the cheek, wished me good night, and padded upstairs, leaving me to drown in paperwork and alcohol. But as the minutes ticked into hours, my unease clawed at me, refusing to be ignored. It was the faint glow of her phone on the kitchen counter that first caught my eye. Lauren never left her phone unattended. It was her lifeline, her constant companion. But there it was, buzzing quietly against the marble, its screen flashing with a name I didn't recognize. Jason, Yoga. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. Jason? The name was unfamiliar, but the implications hit like a hammer. Yoga. Of course. The yoga classes she'd raved about for months, the ones she'd started attending 3 times a week, sometimes 4. The ones that left her glowing and energized, but oddly distant when she came home. The phone buzzed again, the message preview cutting through my spiraling thoughts. Can't stop thinking about tonight. Same time next week? I felt the scotch glass slip from my hand, shattering against the hardwood floor. The sound echoed in the quiet house, sharp and unforgiving, just like the words on the screen. I didn't remember moving, but suddenly I was standing over the counter, my hands gripping the edges so tightly my knuckles turned white. My chest heaved, a mixture of disbelief and fury coursing through me. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't me being the overworked, underappreciated husband she liked to paint me as during her wine-soaked rants to her friends. This was real. Tangible. Proof that the life I thought I was building wasn't just crumbling, it had already been burned to the ground. My mind raced, my instincts screaming at me to confront her, to wake her up and demand an explanation. But a cold, calculated voice in the back of my mind stopped me. Not yet, it whispered. Not like this. I needed more. More proof. More leverage. Something that would leave no room for lies or manipulation. Lauren had always been good with words, spinning stories so smooth you almost believed them yourself. No, if I was going to do this, I needed to be smart. Ruthless. I picked up her phone, my fingers trembling as I navigated through her messages. It didn't take long to find them, weeks' worth of exchanges with Jason, each one a dagger aimed straight at my chest. The details were graphic, explicit. Every touch, every stolen moment, catalogued in texts and photos that I couldn't unsee if I tried. I was still scrolling, my hands shaking with barely contained rage, when I heard it, the soft creak of a floorboard upstairs. My head snapped up, my breath hitching as I listened for any sign that she was coming down. The house was silent again, but I wasn't taking any chances. I quickly locked her phone and placed it back on the counter, my mind already racing with plans. This wasn't just about her betrayal anymore. This was about taking control, about making sure that when I struck back, it wouldn't just hurt, it would destroy. As I made my way upstairs, the cold resolve in my chest solidified. I wasn't going to confront her tonight. Tonight I would let her sleep, let her dream of her perfect little double life. Tomorrow, though? Tomorrow was the beginning of the end. Because Lauren thought she was playing a game. She didn't realize she was playing against someone who'd already decided to burn the board. The morning light seeped through the blinds, soft and pale, painting the room in shades of gold. I stared at the ceiling, my mind already sharp despite the restless hours of sleep that I'd stolen in brief, broken increments. Lauren stirred beside me, her arm brushing mine as she let out a soft sigh. The intimacy of the moment sickened me. How could she lie so easily? How could she share my bed, my life, while giving pieces of herself to someone else? My fingers twitched with the urge to grab her and demand answers, but I forced myself to stay still. The game was just beginning, and I wouldn't play it like a fool. Lauren rolled over, her auburn hair spilling across the pillow like a mockery of innocence. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting mine, and she smiled sleepily. "Morning," she murmured, her voice soft and warm, as if nothing in the world had changed. I smiled back, hollow and practiced. "Morning." She stretched, her bare skin brushing against the sheets as she yawned. "You were up late," she said, her voice tinged with casual curiosity. "I didn't even hear you come to bed." "Just couldn't sleep," I replied, keeping my tone light. "Work's been crazy." Her expression softened with what looked like genuine concern, but I knew better. She was an actress, after all, and I'd been her unwitting audience for far too long. "You need to take it easy," she said, leaning over to kiss me on the cheek. "Stress isn't good for you." "Neither is screwing your yoga instructor," I thought, but the words stayed locked behind my clenched teeth. Instead, I kissed her back, a brief brush of lips that left her satisfied and me seething inside. As she disappeared into the bathroom, humming to herself, I got out of bed and grabbed my phone. The plan was simple: gather every piece of evidence I could and wait for the right moment to strike. I wouldn't just confront her, I'd annihilate her. By the time Lauren emerged, dressed in leggings and a tank top that hugged her figure in all the ways I now loathed, I was already downstairs, sipping coffee and scrolling through my emails. She kissed me on the forehead as she grabbed her car keys, her smile bright and careless. "Heading to yoga," she said, her tone casual, as if the word didn't twist the knife she'd already plunged into my chest. "Have fun," I replied, my voice steady, my expression unreadable. She lingered for a moment, her eyes searching mine as if she sensed something was off. But then she shrugged, dismissing the thought, and walked out the door. The second the front door closed, I sprang into action. I knew her routine, knew she wouldn't be back for at least 2 hours. That gave me more than enough time to start dismantling her carefully constructed facade. I went straight to the kitchen, grabbing her phone from where she'd left it charging on the counter. I'd already guessed her passcode, our anniversary, of all things, and the screen unlocked without resistance. It felt almost too easy, like she wasn't even trying to hide her infidelity. Her messages with Jason were exactly as I'd left them the night before, a treasure trove of depravity that made my stomach churn. But this time, I wasn't just scrolling for shock value. I was taking screenshots, emailing them to myself, and saving them in a folder labeled proof. Every photo, every text, every timestamp, it all went into the digital arsenal I was building. Next, I opened her email. Most of it was mundane: newsletters, appointment confirmations, the occasional exchange with a client. But buried among the clutter, I found an itinerary for a wellness retreat she'd booked 2 weeks from now. 2 nights at a luxury resort, complete with couples massages and private yoga sessions. The guest's name listed alongside hers? Jason. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking with barely contained fury. She wasn't just cheating on me, she was flaunting it, planning romantic getaways like I didn't even exist. My teeth clenched, my vision blurring as I fought the urge to hurl her phone across the room. But I couldn't lose control. Not yet. Instead, I sent the itinerary to my email, adding it to the growing pile of evidence. Then I went upstairs to our bedroom, searching through her drawers and closet for anything else that might expose her lies. It didn't take long to find it: a pair of lace panties shoved into the bottom of her gym bag, still faintly scented with cologne that wasn't mine. I took a picture of them, my heart pounding as I added it to the collection. By the time Lauren returned, flushed and glowing from her yoga class, I was back in the living room, the picture of calm. She smiled at me as she walked in, her eyes bright with a happiness I hadn't seen in months. "You okay?" she asked, tilting her head in that way that used to make my heart ache with love but now only filled me with disgust. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just thinking." "About what?" "Us," I lied, my voice soft and sincere. "I think we should plan a weekend away. Just the 2 of us. Maybe a little cabin up north." Her eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of guilt pass across her face. But then she smiled, her lips curving into that practiced expression of hers. "That sounds perfect," she said, leaning down to kiss me. I kissed her back, my mind already miles ahead, calculating my next move. Let her think I was oblivious, that I was still the devoted husband she could manipulate with ease. Because when I finally brought her world crashing down, I wanted her to feel every second of it. The weekend crept in, each passing moment like a knife dragging through my skin. Lauren buzzed around the house, humming a cheerful tune, her phone always within reach. Her smile was brighter than usual, her touch softer. It was the kind of performance only someone with a clear conscience, or a dangerously manipulative mind, could pull off. But I wasn't the same man she'd grown used to controlling. My silence wasn't weakness, it was the calm before the storm. I spent the next 2 days putting the final pieces of my plan in place. Every document, every text, and every email she thought she'd hidden had been archived. I had what I needed to blow her lies apart, but there was one more thing I needed before I could strike: a witness. Someone neutral. Someone who would see it all unfold. That's where Nate came in. Nate was more than my coworker. He was the kind of guy who'd seen me at my lowest and pulled me out of the gutter more than once. He'd been with me through my father's death, through the sleepless nights building my business, and now through this hell. "Are you sure about this?" Nate asked as we sat across from each other at a quiet diner on Sunday afternoon. His coffee cup was untouched, his gaze fixed on me with an intensity one rarely saw in him. "Absolutely," I replied, my voice steady. "You've seen the messages. You've seen the itinerary. This isn't just some misunderstanding, Nate. She's been screwing me over, literally, and I need someone there when it all goes down." He leaned back in his seat, shaking his head. "You know this is going to get ugly, right? There's no coming back from this. There's nothing to come back to," I said flatly. "Whatever we had died the second she brought him into our bed, into my life. I just want to make sure she can't twist the story when it's over." Nate sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "All right, man. I'll back you up. But you'd better know what you're doing." "I do," I said, more to myself than to him. Monday morning, Lauren left for her usual yoga class, her gym bag slung over one shoulder and her smile as radiant as ever. She kissed me goodbye, her lips brushing mine with a sweetness that made me want to vomit, and promised she'd be back by noon. She didn't know I'd already followed her once, just last week. She didn't know that her yoga studio was a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, its neon vacancy sign buzzing faintly in the midday sun. She didn't know I'd parked 2 blocks away, watching through the zoom lens of my camera as she walked into room 214 with Jason, his arms slung possessively around her waist. I hadn't confronted her then. I'd sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, the rage bubbling in my chest like acid. I wanted to storm into that motel, kick the door down, and drag them both into the street. But I held back. The time wasn't right. Today, though, was different. I waited until Lauren's car disappeared down the street before grabbing my keys and heading out. I didn't need to follow her this time. I already knew where she was going. Instead, I went to Nate's place, where he was waiting for me, his expression grim. "You ready?" he asked as I pulled into his driveway. "Let's go," I said, my jaw tight. We drove in silence, the tension in the car thick enough to choke on. Nate glanced at me a few times, as if trying to gauge whether I was about to snap, but I kept my focus on the road. My mind was already on room 214. When we arrived, I parked in the same spot as before, 2 blocks away, and killed the engine. The motel looked as dingy as ever, its faded paint peeling in the sunlight. I turned to Nate, my voice low and firm. "Stay back until I signal you," I said. "I need her to see me first. I need her to know exactly who's pulling the strings before the world comes crashing down." Nate nodded, his jaw set. "I'll be right here." I stepped out of the car, the warm breeze doing nothing to cool the fire burning in my chest, and made my way to the motel. My heart pounded with every step, my hands clenching and unclenching at my sides. By the time I reached room 214, I was practically vibrating with rage. I raised my hand and knocked. There was a pause, followed by muffled voices. Then the door opened, and there he was. Jason. He was taller than I'd realized, his tan skin glistening with sweat, a towel slung loosely around his neck. His smug grin faltered the moment he saw me, replaced by a look of confusion. "Who the hell are you?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Lauren appeared behind him, her hair disheveled and her face flushed. When her eyes met mine, the color drained from her face. "Jason, who is—" She froze mid-sentence, her mouth hanging open as the realization hit her. "Hello, Lauren," I said, my voice cold and even. "Hope I'm not interrupting." Her lips parted, but no words came out. Jason stepped forward, his chest puffed out as he tried to block me from entering. "Look, buddy, I don't know who you think you are, but—" I cut him off, pulling my phone from my pocket and holding it up. The screen lit up with a photo of the two of them entering the motel together, time-stamped and irrefutable. "You don't know who I am?" I said, my voice laced with venom. "I'm the guy whose wife you've been screwing. Now get the hell out of my way." Jason faltered, his bravado crumbling as he stepped back. Lauren reached for me, her voice trembling. "David, please let me explain." "Save it," I snapped, stepping into the room. "You'll get your chance to explain when Nate gets here." Her eyes widened in panic. "Nate? What does he have to do with this?" "Everything," I said, turning to face her. "Because when I'm done, Lauren, the whole damn world is going to know exactly who you are." Lauren's face strained of color, her mouth moving but producing no sound. Jason, the smug bastard, had stepped back into the room, his hands half raised in some weak attempt at looking unthreatening. He was shirtless, wearing nothing but a pair of cheap motel towels. The sight of him made my stomach churn with rage. "What's Nate got to do with this?" Lauren finally managed to ask, her voice small, shaking, as if she already knew the answer but couldn't face it. I stepped forward, letting the door swing shut behind me with a soft click. My phone was still in my hand, the incriminating photo glowing on the screen. I held it up again, watching her flinch as if the image could physically slap her. "Nate," I said, my voice cold and deliberate, "is the witness. The one who's going to make sure you don't worm your way out of this, Lauren." Jason's mouth twisted into a sneer. "Witness? For what? You don't have shit. You think a photo of us walking into a motel means anything?" He stepped toward me, trying to puff himself up again. "We could have been doing anything in here." I laughed, cold, sharp, a sound that made Lauren visibly flinch. I stepped closer to Jason, towering over him now, feeling the tight coil of fury in my chest begging to snap. "You must think I'm an idiot," I said, my voice low and calm. "You think I didn't get more than just a photo? You think I didn't follow you here last week? Didn't watch you walk into this very room? Didn't see her hands all over you? You think I don't have the texts, the emails, the receipts for the little wellness retreat you two booked?" I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You think I don't have video?" Jason faltered, his bravado crumbling as his eyes darted to Lauren. She was shaking now, her hands clasped together in front of her chest as if she were trying to hold herself together. Her lip quivered as she stammered. "David, please, I can explain. This isn't what it looks like." "Oh, it's not?" I turned to her, my eyes narrowing. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what it is. A pathetic affair between a spineless prick and a liar who can't even face the truth when she's caught red-handed." Jason tried again to step in. "Look, man, this doesn't have to go down like this. Why don't we all just sit down and—" "Shut up." I snapped my head toward him, and the venom in my voice made him take a step back. "You don't speak to me. You don't get to have a say in how this goes down." Before either of them could say anything else, there was a knock at the door. Lauren's head whipped around, her eyes wide with panic. Jason froze, his body tense, and I smiled grimly. Right on time, I said, walking to the door and opening it. Nate stood there, his face set in a grim expression, his phone already in hand. Without a word, he stepped inside, his presence filling the room like a judge stepping into a courtroom. Lauren, meet Nate, I said, gesturing toward him. He's here to make sure I'm not crazy. To make sure I don't lose my temper. And to make sure there's a witness when the two of you try to weasel your way out of this. Lauren's hands flew up to cover her face, her breathing ragged. David, please, she sobbed. You don't understand. No, Lauren, I said, my voice cutting through her sobs like a knife. You don't understand. You don't understand what you've done. You don't understand what you've destroyed. But don't worry, you'll figure it out soon enough. I turned to Jason, who was now standing awkwardly in the corner, his hands half raised as if he thought I might hit him. You, I said, pointing at him. Get dressed. You're leaving. Now. Jason hesitated, glancing at Lauren, who gave him a desperate, pleading look. But I said now. I barked, the force of my voice making him jump. Unless you want me to send these photos to your boss, your family, and anyone else who might care about your pathetic excuse of a life. He paled, grabbing his clothes from the chair by the bed and hastily throwing them on. As he moved toward the door, he turned to Lauren, his voice low. Call me when. You're not going to call her, I interrupted, stepping closer to him. You're not going to see her. Because if I so much as hear your name again, I'll make sure you wish you'd never met her. Jason's mouth snapped shut, and he slinked out the door without another word. The room was silent now, save for Lauren's soft, broken sobs. She sank onto the edge of the bed, her face buried in her hands. Nate stood by the door, his phone still raised, capturing every second of her collapse. David, she whispered, her voice raw. Please don't do this. I stepped closer, towering over her. Don't do this? Don't what, Lauren? Don't hold you accountable? Don't drag your lies into the light? I crouched down so I was eye level with her, my voice dropping to a cold, even tone. You did this to yourself. You threw away our marriage, our trust, for what? For him? She sobbed harder, her shoulders shaking. But I didn't feel pity. I felt nothing. You thought you could betray me and get away with it, I continued. You thought you were so clever, so untouchable. But here's the thing, Lauren, I've been paying attention. And now, I'm going to make sure you lose everything. Lauren's sobs filled the room, her face buried in her hands as if that could somehow shield her from the weight of what was happening. I stood over her, my heart a cold stone in my chest. The man who might have once comforted her, who might have wanted to mend what was broken, was gone. She hadn't just killed him, she'd buried him under months of lies and deceit. Nate leaned against the wall, his phone still raised. His presence was a shield, one that kept me steady, kept me from doing something impulsive. His silent support was the only thing tethering me to sanity as I began dismantling the life Lauren thought she'd gotten away with. You're not saying anything, I said, my voice low and cold. Do you think if you just cry long enough I'll stop? That I'll feel sorry for you? She shook her head, her shoulders trembling. David, please, she whispered through her tears. I know I've made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can. Fix this? I interrupted, my voice rising. Do you even hear yourself? Fix this? You didn't accidentally break a plate, Lauren. You've been screwing another man for God knows how long, lying to my face every single day. You planned vacations with him, used my money to fund your affair, and you want to talk about fixing it? She flinched, her sobs growing quieter as the reality of her position sank in. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she murmured. Bullshit, I spat. You meant for it to go exactly this far. Don't insult me with your half-assed apologies. I turned to Nate, who was watching silently, his expression grim. You getting all this? I asked. Every word, he said, holding up his phone. Lauren's head shot up, her tear-streaked face twisting in panic. What are you doing? She asked, her voice breaking. Why is he recording this? For protection, I said bluntly. To make sure you don't turn this around on me later. You've already proven how good you are at lying, Lauren. I'm not giving you the chance to rewrite the story. Her hands flew to her face again, her fingers clawing at her hair. David, please, she begged, her voice cracking. You're my husband. We're supposed to be a team. Don't do this to me. I laughed bitterly, the sound cutting through her pleas like a knife. A team? Really? Was Jason part of the team too? Or were you just playing both sides for fun? Her face crumpled, but I didn't let up. I was done letting her manipulate me with tears and empty words. This is how it's going to go, I said, my voice cold and unyielding. You're going to pack your things and leave. Today. I don't care where you go, but you're not staying here. This house is mine, and I'll be damned if I let you taint it any longer. Her eyes widened in horror. David, no! You can't just throw me out. Yes, I can, I said sharply. Do you want to know why? Because I've already spoken to a lawyer. I've already started the paperwork. By the time I'm done, you won't have a damn thing left. She stared at me, stunned into silence. That's right, I continued, leaning closer. Did you think I wouldn't notice the credit card charges? The money you drained from our accounts? You think I wasn't paying attention? You think I don't have proof? David, she whispered, her voice trembling. You've been stealing from me, Lauren, I said, my voice deadly calm. And I've documented every single instance. The wellness retreats, the fancy dinners, the gifts you bought him. It's all there. And if you even think about fighting me in court, I'll make sure every bit of it comes out. Her face crumpled, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. You're lying, she said weakly. Am I? I pulled my phone from my pocket, scrolling to the folder I'd labeled Lauren's lies. I opened the screenshots, the emails, the credit card statements, and shoved the screen in her face. Does this look like I'm lying? She looked away, her sobs growing louder. And it doesn't stop there, I added. I've already reached out to Jason's wife. Clara, isn't it? Sweet woman. She seemed very interested in the photos and messages I sent her. Lauren's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. You didn't, she breathed. Oh, I did, I said, my lips curling into a grim smile. You think you're the only one who knows how to pull strings, Lauren? Clara's furious, by the way. I wouldn't be surprised if Jason's already dealing with his own little personal apocalypse. Her body shook with sobs, but I felt nothing, no pity, no regret. Just the cold satisfaction of watching her world begin to collapse. Get out, I said, my voice flat. Pack your things and leave before I decide to call the police and report you for fraud. Because believe me, I'm not bluffing. She opened her mouth to protest, but the look on my face must have silenced her. Without another word, she stood on trembling legs and began gathering her belongings. I turned to Nate, who was still recording, his expression unreadable. Thanks for being here, I said quietly. He nodded. You sure you're good? I'm good, I lied. Just make sure you send me that recording. Lauren passed by me, dragging a suitcase behind her. She paused at the door, her eyes red and swollen. David, she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't look at her. Goodbye, Lauren. The door closed behind her, leaving the room in silence. I stood there for a long moment, the weight of everything settling in my chest. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. But the first strike had landed, and now the game was mine to control. The house felt emptier without Lauren in it, but it wasn't the comforting silence I'd hoped for. It was hollow, like a stage after the performance, the actors gone but the props still scattered, mocking me with reminders of what had happened here. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the spot where her phone used to charge, the faint outlines still visible on the counter. It was the little things that stung the most, the half-empty bottle of wine on the counter, her favorite mug still in the sink. My rage had carried me through the confrontation, but now the weight of the fallout began to settle. I poured a drink, something stronger than coffee, and let the burn in my throat distract me. Nate had left shortly after Lauren, his expression one of quiet concern. He didn't say much, just promised to send me the recording. He didn't need to say what we both knew, this was just the beginning. I downed the drink in one gulp, setting the glass down harder than I meant to. No, I wasn't going to spiral. Not now. There was still work to do. Lauren might have been gone, but her betrayal had left scars I wasn't done dealing with. I went to my office and opened my laptop, the glow of the screen cutting through the dim light. The folder labeled Lauren's Lies sat there, staring at me, daring me to open it. I clicked it, scrolling through the evidence I'd collected over the past week. The texts, the photos, the credit card statements, all of it was there, neatly organized and undeniable. But this wasn't just about Lauren anymore. No, this was about Jason too. The man who had strutted into my life and taken what wasn't his, smug and arrogant like he never faced the consequences. I wasn't going to let him walk away unscathed. My first call was to Clara, his wife. She answered on the second ring, her voice sharp and tinged with exhaustion. "Who is this?" she demanded, skipping the pleasantries. "It's David," I said, keeping my tone calm. "Lauren's husband." There was a long pause, the kind of silence that feels heavy with realization. "I was wondering when you'd call," she said finally, her voice tight. "I saw the pictures. I thought you might want more," I said, my voice dripping with venom. "Because trust me, Clara, there's plenty." She let out a bitter laugh. "I've been suspicious for months, but I didn't think he'd be stupid enough to leave a trail. How bad is it?" "Bad enough," I replied, opening one of the emails I'd sent myself. "I can forward you everything, texts, photos, even their little retreat itinerary. But I need to know where you stand." "Where I stand?" she repeated, her voice hardening. "I stand on the side of burning him to the ground. He's been draining our joint account for weeks. If you've got the proof, I'll use it." I smiled grimly. "Good. I'll send it all over. And if you're planning to confront him, let me know. I might want to watch." Clara's laugh was cold, like ice cracking. "You're a piece of work, David." "Not always," I said, my tone sharp. "But betrayal has a way of changing people." With Clara on my side, the next step was the workplace. Jason's smug confidence had come from somewhere, and I was willing to bet it was rooted in a false sense of invincibility. People like him always thought they were untouchable, until someone like me came along. A quick search online led me to Jason's LinkedIn profile. He worked in sales at a mid-sized tech company, the kind of place that valued reputation and image above all else. Perfect. I drafted an email, attaching a selection of the most damning evidence, and addressed it to Jason's boss. The subject line was simple: concerns regarding employee conduct. The body of the email was just as concise. To whom it may concern. I am writing to bring to your attention a matter involving one of your employees, Jason, last name. Attached are photos, text messages, and financial records that demonstrate a pattern of unethical behavior, including the misuse of funds and inappropriate relationships that could reflect poorly on your organization. While this is a personal matter, I felt it necessary to inform you, as Jason's actions have crossed professional boundaries that may impact your company's reputation. Sincerely, David, last name. I hit send, the whoosh of the email leaving my outbox oddly satisfying. I wasn't naive enough to think it would get him fired outright, but it would plant a seed of doubt, a stain on his perfect record. The kind of thing that would follow him wherever he went. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I kept myself busy, emails, phone calls, even a quick meeting with my lawyer to finalize the divorce papers. Adam, my lawyer, was efficient and unflinchingly direct, which was exactly what I needed. "You're in a strong position," he said, sliding a stack of papers across the desk. "The financial records, the infidelity, it all works in your favor. We can push for full ownership of the house, and given the evidence, she won't have much ground to fight back." "Good," I said, my voice firm. "I want her out of my life completely." Adam nodded, his pen clicking as he made a note. "You'll need to be prepared for backlash, though. She might play the sympathy card, especially if this gets out publicly. Let her, I said, standing. I'm not hiding anymore. She wanted to play games? I'll show her what it looks like to lose. That night, I sat alone in the living room, the weight of everything finally starting to settle. The house was quiet, the silence no longer taunting but soothing. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of control, like I was steering the ship instead of drowning in its wake. But this was far from over. Lauren had underestimated me once. Jason had underestimated me. They both thought I'd crumble, that I'd fade quietly into the background while they continued their charade. They were wrong. And tomorrow, I'd prove it. The next morning, the storm began to hit. By the time I stepped into my office, the groundwork I'd laid was already shaking Lauren and Jason's worlds. I wasn't just dismantling their lives. I was tearing apart the carefully constructed facade they'd used to mock me. The first message came from Clara, Jason's wife. I'd barely set my coffee down when my phone buzzed. Clara just confronted him. He's begging me to let him stay. What a coward. Me, what did he say when you showed him the photos? Clara, oh, he had the nerve to call it a mistake. Me, guessing he didn't mention the wellness retreat? Clara, oh, I brought it up. He swore it was just a weekend to clear his head. Yeah, right. He's packing his bags now. You did good, David. Let's keep in touch. I smiled at the screen. Clara wasn't just angry, she was nuclear. That worked perfectly for me. While she dismantled her marriage on her end, I had my own wrecking ball swinging on this side. By mid-morning, my email pinged with a reply from Jason's employer. The response was professional but curt, which told me they weren't brushing this under the rug. Subject: concerns regarding employee conduct. Mr. Last name. Thank you for bringing this matter to our attention. We take allegations of misconduct very seriously. Please be assured that we are conducting an internal review of this situation, and will act accordingly. It wasn't a direct confirmation that Jason's life was about to implode, but it was enough. Whether or not they fired him didn't matter, he'd been exposed. His smug sense of invincibility was gone. Lauren, on the other hand, was eerily quiet. I hadn't heard from her since she walked out of the house with her suitcase the day before. No calls, no texts, nothing. That silence should have been a relief, but instead, it made me suspicious. People like Lauren didn't just disappear. They regrouped, recalibrated, and prepared to strike back. I knew it was only a matter of time before she tried to play the victim. By early afternoon, my suspicions were confirmed. My lawyer, Adam, called me, his tone brisk and serious. She's hired an attorney, he said without preamble. I wasn't surprised. What's her angle? She's claiming emotional abuse, he said, his voice flat. She's arguing that your controlling behavior and emotional neglect drove her to seek companionship elsewhere. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Of course she is. She's spinning it so she's the victim. Adam sighed. It's standard. Don't worry, we have the upper hand here. The evidence you've gathered is strong. She can claim emotional abuse all she wants, but the financial records and the proof of her affair speak louder. Good, I said. Push hard. I don't just want this to end, I want her to regret ever trying to fight me. You got it, Adam said. That evening, the second bomb dropped. I was scrolling through my phone when I saw it, a post on Lauren's social media. She'd uploaded a picture of herself, sitting on the edge of a hotel bed, her face pale but her expression defiant. The caption read, After 14 years of marriage, I finally found the strength to walk away from a toxic relationship. Sometimes you have to choose yourself, even when it hurts. The comments poured in almost instantly, a flood of sympathy from her friends and followers. You're so strong, Lauren. Sending love. Proud of you for standing up for yourself. Men don't realize what they have until it's gone. I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. She was trying to rewrite the narrative, painting herself as the brave victim who had escaped my supposed tyranny. It was laughable. I didn't respond. I didn't comment. Instead, I saved the post, took screenshots, and added them to the growing folder of evidence. The next day, I took the gloves off. I contacted a journalist I'd worked with in the past, a guy named Andrew who specialized in personal exposés. He owed me a favor for helping him with a story last year, and now was the time to cash it in. "David," he said when I called. "Long time no see. What's up?" "I've got a story for you," I said, keeping my tone casual. "Cheating wife, stolen money, a messy divorce. Interested?" "Always," he said, his curiosity piqued. "You got proof?" "I'll send it all over," I said. "Photos, texts, financials, the works. I want this public, Andrew. I want everyone to see her for who she really is." He hesitated. "You sure about this?" "Once it's out there, there's no going back." "I'm sure," I said firmly. "She wants to play games? Let's see how she handles losing." By the time I got home that evening, I was running on pure adrenaline. My lawyer was drafting an aggressive response to her claims, Jason's employer was digging into his misconduct, and Clara had confirmed that she'd filed for divorce. But the real dagger would come when Andrew published the article. Lauren had relied on her image for years, crafting a persona that fooled everyone around her. Now, that image was about to shatter. I poured another drink, settling into the armchair in the living room. The house was still quiet, but this time, it felt different. This wasn't the silence of emptiness, it was the calm before the storm. Lauren thought she could spin the narrative, but she'd underestimated me again. She didn't realize I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting to expose her for what she truly was. And tomorrow, the world would see the truth. The article went live the next morning. It was brutal, as I'd intended. Andrew had taken the mountain of evidence I'd provided and crafted a damning exposé that spared no detail. The headline alone was enough to make my coffee taste better. "Betrayal in Suburbia, the double life of Lauren, last name." The story painted a vivid picture of Lauren's deceit, her affair with Jason, her misuse of our finances to fund their escapades, and the lies she'd spun to maintain her facade. Screenshots of her messages with Jason were embedded in the piece, her words laid bare for the world to see. The retreat itinerary, the photos of her slipping into the motel, even the social media posts where she played the victim, it was all there. By mid-morning, the article was spreading like wildfire. Friends, colleagues, and even distant acquaintances were sharing it, their captions dripping with shock and condemnation. "Unbelievable. I can't imagine doing this to someone after 14 years of marriage. How do people live with themselves?" Lauren's social media, once flooded with supportive comments on her victim narrative, was now eerily quiet. The post she'd made, the one about escaping a toxic relationship, had vanished. Good. Around noon, Clara called. "Have you seen it?" she asked, her voice practically buzzing with satisfaction. "Of course," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Andrew did a hell of a job." "He did more than that," she said. "Jason's employer saw it. He's been fired." I blinked, surprised by how quickly things were unraveling. "Fired? That's fast." "Well, apparently, they don't take kindly to their employees dragging the company's name through the mud," she said with a sharp laugh. "Not that I'm complaining. He deserves worse." "How's he taking it?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Badly," she said, her tone dripping with contempt. "He came crawling back to me last night, begging me to forgive him. I told him to get out before I called the cops." "Good for you," I said. Clara sighed, her voice softening. "And you? How are you holding up?" I hesitated, the question catching me off guard. "I'm fine," I said finally. "This is what needed to happen." "Yeah," she said quietly. "But it doesn't make it easy." "It's easier than pretending everything's fine," I said, my tone firm. "At least now, I can move forward." By the afternoon, Lauren broke her silence. My phone buzzed with a text from her, a long, rambling message filled with pleas and half-hearted excuses. "Lauren, David, please. I know you're angry, and I don't blame you. But the article, it's too far. You've humiliated me. Everyone's seen it. My family won't even talk to me. My friends are abandoning me. Can't we talk? Please? I stared at the screen, my lips curling into a humorless smile. She was worried about her reputation, not about what she'd done to me, to us. Typical. I didn't reply. An hour later, another message came through. Lauren, I'm begging you, David. We don't have to do this. I'll give you the house. I won't fight the divorce. Just please take the article down. I'll do anything. There it was, the desperation I'd been waiting for. But I wasn't interested in her bargains. She'd set the stage for this when she decided to betray me, and now she could live with the consequences. I forwarded the text to my lawyer, Adam, who called me almost immediately. She's caving, he said, his voice filled with grim satisfaction. She's offering the house and won't contest the divorce. This is as close to a win as you're going to get. Make it official, I said. You sure? We could push harder, given the evidence we have. I thought about it for a moment. The idea of squeezing her further was tempting, but it wasn't necessary. She was broken, her reputation in shambles, and her lies exposed. The house and a clean divorce were all I wanted now. I'm sure, I said finally. Close it out. Will do, Adam said. I'll have the papers drawn up by the end of the week. That evening I allowed myself a rare moment of reflection. I sat on the back porch, a glass of scotch in hand, and stared out at the setting sun. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of betrayal, anger, and cold, calculated revenge. And now, for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt calm. I wasn't naive enough to think the scars would fade overnight. Lauren's betrayal had cut deep, and the wound would take time to heal. But as I sat there, the air cool against my skin, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: relief. Lauren had spent years weaving a web of lies, but now, the web was gone, burned to ash. She had nothing left to hide behind. And while she would spend the rest of her life dealing with the fallout, I would be free. The thought made me smile, a small, quiet smile that felt foreign but good. This wasn't the end, it was a new beginning. As the night settled in, I checked my phone one last time before heading inside. There was a message from Clara. Clara, we should grab a drink sometime. Compare notes. I chuckled, shaking my head as I typed back a reply. Me, you're on. First round's on me. The next chapter of my life was beginning, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to face it. The house felt different now. It wasn't the emptiness that had gnawed at me when Lauren first left, nor was it the cold sterility of a place stripped of meaning. This was something new, a quiet, steady calm that didn't demand anything of me. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without the weight of her lies crushing my chest. But I wasn't done yet. There were still loose ends to tie up, and I wasn't the type to leave a mess unfinished. Lauren signed the divorce papers on Thursday. Adam sent me a photo of her signature, her handwriting neat and deliberate despite what must have been shaking hands. It was done. The house was mine, the accounts were split, and her financial demands had been reduced to zero. She had nothing left to hold over me. By Friday, I'd moved forward with transferring the deed fully into my name. Adam assured me it was a formality, but I wanted it done as quickly as possible. There was something satisfying about knowing that this house, once a shared space full of memories, both good and bad, was now entirely mine. It felt like reclaiming a piece of myself she'd tried to take. Lauren hadn't contacted me since her last desperate texts begging for the article to be taken down. She must have realized that I wasn't going to respond. The silence was a relief, but it also made me wary. People like Lauren didn't just disappear into the background. They bided their time, waiting for the moment to claw their way back. Saturday night, I met Clara for drinks. We'd agreed on a quiet bar downtown, the kind of place with dim lighting and soft jazz playing in the background. I spotted her immediately when I walked in, sharp, confident, and more composed than I'd expected for someone whose life had been ripped apart in the past week. She waved me over, a small smile on her lips. "David," she said, her voice smooth and steady. "You're late." "Traffic," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. "And I wasn't sure if you'd actually show." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "I'm not the one hiding from this mess. That's Jason's job." I ordered a scotch, and she ordered another glass of wine. For a moment, we sat in silence, the weight of what had brought us together hanging heavy between us. "So," she said finally, leaning forward, "how does it feel? Winning, I mean." I took a sip of my drink, savoring the burn before answering. "It doesn't feel like winning," I admitted. "It feels necessary." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Same. When I kicked Jason out, I thought I'd feel this huge sense of relief. But all I feel is tired. Like it's going to take years to undo the damage." "It will," I said bluntly. "But at least now you're free to start." She smiled faintly, raising her glass in a toast. "To freedom, then. However messy it looks." "To freedom," I echoed, clinking my glass against hers. The night wore on, the drinks flowed, and the conversation shifted from our shared chaos to lighter, more personal topics. Clara told me about her work as a graphic designer, how she'd been planning to quit her job before all of this happened. I told her about the business I'd built from the ground up, how it had been my lifeline when everything else felt like it was crumbling. By the time we left the bar, I realized I'd laughed more in those few hours than I had in months. "Thanks for this," she said as we stepped outside, the cool night air brushing against our faces. "It's been a while since I've felt normal." "Same," I said, shoving my hands into my pockets. "Maybe we should do it again sometime. You know, compare notes." She grinned. "Careful, David. People might start to talk." "Let them," I said, smirking. "I've got nothing to hide." The next morning, I woke up to another message from Lauren. "Lauren, I need to see you. Please. Just one last time. I need closure." I stared at the text, my stomach twisting. Closure? That was rich, coming from her. After everything she'd done, after the lies and the betrayal, she thought she had the right to ask me for anything. I considered ignoring it, but something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the need to look her in the eye one last time, to see her stripped of the power she once wielded so easily. I replied with 2 words, 1 hour. She showed up at the house an hour later, dressed in jeans and a sweater that hung loose on her frame. She looked smaller, more fragile, like the weight of her own destruction was finally catching up to her. "Thank you for seeing me," she said softly, stepping inside. Her eyes darted around the house, lingering on the photos that still hung on the walls, the furniture we'd picked out together. She looked like she didn't belong anymore, like a ghost haunting a place she no longer recognized. "What do you want, Lauren?" I asked, my voice cold. She flinched, but she didn't cry. Instead, she sank onto the edge of the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I need to say I'm sorry." I laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. "Sorry? Now you're sorry? For what, Lauren? For lying to me? For betraying me? Or for getting caught?" Her face crumpled, but I didn't feel pity. I'd run out of that a long time ago. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," she said, her voice trembling. "But I need you to know. I didn't mean for it to go this far." I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms. "Spare me the excuses. You meant for it to go exactly this far. You didn't care about the consequences. You didn't care about me." Her tears spilled over, but I stood firm, unmoved. "Why did you even come here?" I asked. "To make yourself feel better? To get the last word?" "No," she whispered. "I came because I loved you, David. I still do." I stared at her, my chest tightening, but not with sadness. With anger. With disgust. "You don't love me," I said, my voice low. "You love what I gave you. The comfort. The stability. The safety. You loved the life I'd built for you, not the man who built it." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't relent. "This is the last time you'll ever step foot in this house," I said. "Take your closure and leave. Because I don't owe you a damn thing." Lauren left, her shoulders hunched as she disappeared down the driveway. The door closed behind her, and with it, I felt the last remnants of her shadow finally lift. The air in the house was still. Lauren's absence didn't feel like a gaping hole anymore. It felt like a wound that had finally stopped bleeding. I watched from the window as her car disappeared down the street, her silhouette hunched and defeated. For the first time in months, I felt lighter. But it wasn't over. Not yet. There was still one final move to make. The next few days passed in a blur. I spent most of my time focused on work, pouring myself into the projects that had been neglected during the chaos. But even as I checked boxes and hit deadlines, my mind kept circling back to Lauren's words during her visit. "I loved you, David. I still do." It wasn't love, it was desperation. And I knew she was far from done trying to claw her way back into my life. On Friday morning, the inevitable happened. Lauren's smear campaign began. She took to social media, twisting the narrative in her favor. The posts were carefully crafted, dripping with faux vulnerability. After 14 years of being silenced, I'm finally speaking my truth. No one deserves to live in fear of their partner's anger. I made mistakes, but they don't justify the emotional abuse I endured. If you've ever felt trapped in a relationship, know that you're not alone. The comments rolled in quickly, filled with sympathy and outrage on her behalf. She was painting herself as the victim, erasing the trail of lies and betrayal that had led to this point. It was infuriating, but I didn't panic. This was exactly the kind of move I'd been expecting. That evening, I reached out to Andrew, the journalist who had written the original exposé. He answered on the first ring. "David," he said, his voice sharp. "I saw her posts. What's the plan?" "Let's release the second wave," I said. He chuckled darkly. "You've been holding back, haven't you?" "Of course," I said. "I figured she'd try something like this. That's why I didn't give you everything the first time." Andrew's tone turned serious. "You're sure about this? Once it's out, there's no taking it back." "I'm sure," I said. "She wanted to play dirty? Let's show her what dirty really looks like." The second article hit like a sledgehammer the next morning. The full picture, Lauren, last name, web of deception. This time, Andrew didn't just expose her affair, he dismantled her lies piece by piece. He included the financial records showing her misuse of my money, the screenshots of her messages to Jason, and even a video clip of her admitting to the affair during our confrontation. But the coup de grace was the juxtaposition of her recent victimhood posts with the evidence of her actions, showing her hypocrisy in stark detail. The backlash was immediate and merciless. Her comment sections turned into battlegrounds, with people demanding answers and calling her out for her lies. The friends who had rallied around her before were now silent, or worse, vocal in their condemnation. Later that day, Clara called. "David, have you seen this?" she asked, her voice laced with disbelief. "Of course," I said, sipping my coffee. "It's exactly what I wanted." "She's completely destroyed," Clara said, her tone tinged with satisfaction. "Jason called me this morning, begging me to stop sharing the article with people we know. He said it's ruining him." "And what did you say?" I laughed in his face. Clara said, a sharp edge to her words. "He ruined himself. I'm just enjoying the show." We talked for a while longer, the conversation veering into lighter territory. It felt good, like talking to an old friend. When we hung up, I realized how little weight I felt in my chest. Lauren and Jason's downfall wasn't just satisfying, it was freeing. By Sunday evening, Lauren's posts had disappeared, along with her social media accounts. She'd gone silent, retreating into whatever hole she'd crawled out of. I doubted she'd resurface any time soon, not after the truth had obliterated her carefully constructed image. I poured myself a drink and sat on the back porch, staring out at the darkening sky. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of chaos and destruction, but now there was peace. It wasn't perfect. There were still scars, still moments of anger and hurt that flared up when I least expected them. But it was peace nonetheless. Months passed, and life began to settle into a new normal. The divorce was finalized, the house was fully mine, and I'd thrown myself back into my work with renewed focus. Clara and I stayed in touch, grabbing drinks now and then and sharing updates on our respective lives. There was no romantic tension, no awkwardness, just a mutual understanding that came from shared pain. One evening, as we sat in the same quiet bar where we'd first met, she raised her glass to me. "To moving on," she said, her lips curling into a genuine smile. I raised my glass in return. "To freedom." We drank, the clink of our glasses echoing softly in the dimly lit room. Looking back, I realized Lauren had done me a favor. Her betrayal had shattered the illusion of our marriage, yes, but it had also forced me to confront truths I'd been avoiding for years. It had pushed me to reclaim my life, to draw boundaries I'd let blur for far too long. She'd thought she could break me. Instead, she'd set me free. And with that, I closed the chapter on Lauren and everything she'd brought into my life. I didn't forgive her. I didn't need to. Forgiveness wasn't necessary when you had clarity. All I needed was the peace that came from knowing she could never touch me again. And that, more than anything, was my revenge.